My family has a very, very specific definition of what it means to be successful. And, well, according to them, I just didn't make the cut. So when the invitations for our massive, once-a-decade family reunion went out, mine must have gotten lost in the mail. They told my mom I wasn't successful enough to be there. So, I did the only logical thing I could think of. I let them plan the entire, elaborate party. I waited until the day of the event. And then, I showed up as the brand new owner of the venue, just to let them know their reservation had been cancelled. To really get my family, you have to understand the pecking order. At the very top is my Aunt Carol. She's the self-appointed matriarch, the keeper of traditions, and the final judge of everyone's life choices. Her kids, my cousins Mark and Jessica, are the golden children. Mark's a corporate lawyer, Jessica's a surgeon, and they both married people who are just as impressive. They're the family's gold standard. And then there's me. I'm a freelance UX/UI designer. I don't have a fancy job title or work for some big-name firm. To them, my career is just a cute little hobby. Something I do from my little apartment while the real adults are out there conquering the world. For years, every family get-together was a minefield of backhanded compliments. "Oh, it must be so nice to have so much flexibility," Aunt Carol would say, her voice just dripping with fake pity. My success wasn't something they could brag about at the country club, so, in their eyes, it just didn't exist. I was used to being a footnote in the family newsletter, the girl kind of awkwardly shoved to the edge of the family photo. The big event everyone was buzzing about was the Sterling family reunion. It only happens every 10 years, so it's a massive deal. Aunt Carol had been planning it for months. She booked this breathtaking venue called the Willow Creek Estate, a sprawling lodge with acres of land, a private lake, the works. The family group chat, which I soon realized I wasn't in, was constantly pinging with updates about caterers and matching t-shirts. I figured not being in the chat was just an accident. So, I called my mom. Her voice was tight, hesitant. "Honey," she started, and I knew right away something was wrong. "Carol and the others, they feel like this reunion is a celebration of the family's achievements." She paused, and the silence was heavy. "They just think it might be uncomfortable for you. You know, to be around all that success." The words hit me like a ton of bricks. It wasn't an oversight. It was a deliberate, calculated FU. I wasn't just uninvited, I was officially deemed unworthy. They weren't just having a party without me, they were making a public statement that my very presence would somehow tarnish their glorious celebration of success. The hurt was deep, instant, and it confirmed every single time I'd ever felt like an outsider in my own damn family. For about 2 days, I was just numb. I kept replaying my mom's words. "Uncomfortable for you." It was such a classic move, an insult wrapped up in fake concern. They didn't want me there because my life didn't fit their perfect little picture. But then, that hurt started to curdle into something else. Something cold and sharp. Anger. The sadness turned into this quiet, steady resolve. They wanted to use success as a weapon? Fine. Game on. It started as a crazy idea in the middle of the night. What if they couldn't have the reunion at the estate at all? What if something happened to their reservation? It was petty, I know, but it was a start. I grabbed my laptop and started digging. The Willow Creek Estate. I looked through public records, county filings, business registries, and then I found it. The estate wasn't owned by some big corporation. It was a private business. And the owner, an older guy named Mr. Harrison, had just listed the entire property for sale. He was retiring. And that's when the plan, in all its audacious, terrifying glory, clicked into place. This wasn't just about petty revenge anymore. This was poetry. They wanted to keep me out of their exclusive club? Fine. I'll just buy the clubhouse. See, Here's the part my family never bothered to understand. While they saw the struggling artist, I was quietly building a career for over a decade. I'd worked with major tech companies, I'd managed huge projects, and most importantly, I was smart with my money. I invested. I saved. They saw a tiny apartment. I saw low overhead that let me pour cash into my portfolio. They saw a freelancer. I saw a business owner with a great client list and a very healthy income. I called a commercial real estate broker using an LLC I'd set up years ago for my business. I told him the whole story. He laughed. I've seen deals close for pettier reasons, he said, but this one takes the cake. The next few weeks were a total whirlwind of secret calls and tense negotiations. It felt like walking a tightrope. My mom would call and ask what I was up to, and I'd have to make up some story about a huge new project. At one point, Aunt Carol cornered me at my grandma's birthday lunch and asked if I was still doing that little computer art thing. I just smiled and nodded, knowing the signed purchase agreement was sitting in my briefcase at that very moment. The thrill of the secret was unbelievable. And then, 3 weeks before the reunion, it was done. The ink was dry. The Willow Creek estate, in all of its beautiful, sprawling, pretentious glory, was mine. I did absolutely nothing. I didn't make a big announcement. I didn't send a single gloating text. I just waited. The family chat kept buzzing. The custom t-shirts arrived. They finalized the menu. Their excitement was building, and they had no idea they were walking straight into a trap they had set themselves. The day of the reunion was a perfect, sunny Saturday. I drove up to the estate early, not with a party outfit, but with my lawyer. I pulled into the space marked owner. I walked through the lobby, right past the giant fireplace they had all gushed over, and into the manager's office. Which was now my office. Around 1 p.m., the first cars started rolling up the long driveway. Of course, it was Aunt Carol and Uncle Bob, arriving early to take charge. They swaggered into the lobby like they owned the place. And then they saw me. I was sitting in one of the big leather armchairs by the fireplace, just sipping a coffee and looking over the day's event schedule. Carol literally froze. "What are you doing here?" she snapped. "I thought we made it clear." I slowly stood up and put my cup down on the mantel. I gave her my best customer service smile. "Welcome to my estate," I said, my voice bouncing off the high ceilings. "I'm so glad you could make it. Unfortunately, there's been a change in management. And with that, a little change to today's guest list. I'm afraid your reservation has been cancelled." The silence that followed was probably the most satisfying sound I have ever heard in my entire life. Their faces were a symphony of confusion, then disbelief, then dawning horror, and finally, sputtering rage. "You can't do this!" Carol shrieked, her face turning beet red. "We had a contract. We paid a deposit." "You did," I said calmly. "And that deposit will be refunded in full. See, the previous owner was obligated to honor your booking. I, however, am not. As the new owner, I reserve the right to refuse service. And today? I'm refusing." And that was just Aunt Carol. You can only imagine the chaos when the rest of the family started to arrive. As more cars pulled up, the lobby turned into absolute chaos. My cousins, Mark the lawyer and Jessica the surgeon, tried to throw their weight around, but their fancy titles were useless here. They threatened to sue. I just pointed them to my lawyer, who was clearly having the time of his life watching the drama unfold from a corner of the room. When my mom showed up, she just stood there, her face a mix of pure shock and, was that pride? I let them all steam for a good while. Then, I held up my hands for quiet. "The Sterling family reunion, as planned by Carol, is cancelled," I announced to the room. "However, I will be hosting a new event this evening. It's called a reunion for family. The only ticket you need to get in is to actually be family." No proof of success required. I then pulled out a small list I'd made. I invited my grandmother. I invited a few aunts and uncles who had always been kind to me. I invited my cousins who never made me feel like I was less than. And I invited my parents, telling them we'd be having a very long talk later. Aunt Carol, Uncle Bob, Mark, Jessica, and their little committee of judgment? They weren't on the list. I had security politely escort them off the property. I have to say, the image of my cousin Mark's BMW doing a U-turn of shame down the driveway is a memory I will cherish for the rest of my days. The party that evening was smaller, quieter, and 1,000 times more real. With all that pressure and judgment gone, people actually talked to each other. We shared stories. We laughed. We connected like an actual family, not a collection of resumes. It was the first time in years I didn't feel like I had to hold my breath around them. My family's definition of success was a cage. And for years, all I did was rattle the bars, desperate to prove I belonged inside. But what I learned is that real success has nothing to do with their approval. It's about having the guts to define your own worth, building a life on your own terms, and, if you have to, having the courage to buy the whole damn venue when they won't let you in the door. My relationship with a lot of my family is different now. Some of those bridges are probably burned for good. But I'm no longer the kid on the edge of the photo. Now, I'm the one who owns the frame, the camera, and the whole studio. I built a life that didn't need their permission, and I learned that the best revenge isn't about getting even, it's about setting your own rules for your own happiness. If this story hit home for you, don't forget to like and subscribe for more. Thanks for listening.